The massive ship fell through Earth's atmosphere like a dying star. It was not supposed to be there. They had been running for 300 years, jumping from system to system, always one step ahead of their hunters. Their navigation computer had failed during the last jump, and now they were crashing toward a blue planet they had never seen before. Captain held onto her command chair as the ship shook violently. Around her, thousands of her people screamed in fear. They were the last of a gentle species that had once built great cities of crystal and light. Now they were refugees, hunted across the galaxy by the Empire, a brutal civilization that consumed weaker species for sport and resources. The ship hit the water near a coastline. The impact killed the remaining engines, and the vessel began to sink slowly. Emergency systems activated, keeping the water out, but knew they had nowhere to go. They had crashed on an unknown world, and their ship would never fly again. On the shores of Japan, fishermen watched in shock as the massive alien vessel settled in the shallow waters. Within hours, military forces from around the world were mobilizing. Satellites had tracked the ship's descent. Every government on Earth was now aware that humanity was not alone in the universe. The United Nations held an emergency session. World leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to attack, others wanted to wait. A few suggested communication. The debates lasted for days while the alien ship sat silently in the water, making no hostile moves. Inside the ship faced her council of elders. They were terrified. They had encountered many species in their long flight across the stars. Most had been hostile or indifferent. Some had sold their location to the for-profit. The elders expected the same from whatever creatures lived on this planet. But they had no choice. Their food supplies were running low. Their medical systems were failing. Their children were sick. Made the decision to send out a communication signal, a simple message of peace, translated into mathematical patterns that any intelligent species could understand. Dr. Sarah was the first human to decode the message. She worked at a small research facility in California, and she had been analyzing the alien signals for days. When she finally cracked the code, she sat back in her chair and cried. The message was simple. We are not warriors. We are tired. We are hungry. We have children. Please do not hurt us. Sarah shared her findings with the world. The message spread across the internet within hours. People everywhere read those simple words and felt something shift inside them. These were not invaders. These were not conquerors. These were refugees, just like the millions of human refugees who had fled war and hunger throughout history. Public opinion began to change. Protests erupted in major cities, not against the aliens but in support of them. People held signs that read "Welcome to Earth" and "Refugees Welcome" and "We Stand Together." The world had found something to unite behind. The Japanese government made the first move. They sent a small boat toward the alien ship, carrying food, water, and medical supplies. They also sent Doctor, a linguist who had been working on the alien language. The boat approached slowly, showing no weapons. Watched the small vessel approach on her damaged screens. She had expected warships. She had expected weapons. Instead, she saw a tiny boat carrying what looked like supplies. She made another difficult decision and opened one of the lower hatches. Doctor stepped into the alien ship and found herself surrounded by thin, pale beings with large, dark eyes. They were clearly malnourished. Their clothes were worn and patched. Children clung to their parents, staring at her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Bowed deeply, a gesture of respect in her culture. One of the aliens, taller than the others, bowed back. Communication was slow at first, but was patient and was desperate. Within weeks, they had established a basic vocabulary, told about their destroyed, about the who hunted them. She showed her images of warships, massive vessels bristling with weapons, crewed by a species that saw all other life as prey. Brought this information back to her government, and her government shared it with the world. Humanity learned that the galaxy was not a peaceful place. There were predators out there, species that conquered and destroyed without mercy. And now, 30,000 refugees were sitting in a broken ship in Japanese waters, waiting to see if humanity would help them or turn them away. The debate that followed was fierce. Some argued that helping them would bring them to Earth. Others said that turning away refugees went against everything humanity claimed to believe in. Politicians made speeches. Experts gave opinions. Religious leaders called for compassion. Military commanders warned about the risks. In the end, it was not the governments that made the decision. It was the people. Ordinary humans from every nation began sending supplies, money, and support. Doctors volunteered to treat the sick. Engineers offered to help repair what they could of the alien ship. Teachers started learning the language so they could help the children. The response was overwhelming. The United Nations finally voted to grant the asylum on Earth. They would be given land in several countries where they could build new homes. They would be protected under international law. And humanity would begin preparing for the possibility that they might one day come looking for their prey. Wept when she heard the news. She had expected death or slavery. Instead, she had found kindness. She had found a species willing to risk war with a galactic empire to protect strangers who had crashed on their shores by accident. They began to settle on Earth. They were given territories in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and several other countries. They built small communities, trying to preserve what remained of their culture while also learning about their new home. Human volunteers helped them adjust to Earth's food, weather, and customs. The children adapted fastest. Young began attending human schools, learning human languages, making human friends. They played together, studied together, and slowly began to heal from the trauma of their long flight. Human children asked them questions about space and stars, and children asked them questions about oceans and trees. Years passed. The communities grew and thrived. They shared their technology with humanity, advanced knowledge of medicine, energy, and material science. In return, humanity shared something they had lost long ago: hope. They had been running for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to have a home. Earth gave them that. But they had not forgotten them. Their hunters had tracked them across the galaxy for centuries. When they detected the energy signature of the crashed ship, they set course for Earth. It would take them years to arrive, but they were patient. They always caught their prey eventually. Humanity knew they were coming. They had warned them, and human astronomers had detected the approaching fleet. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth united for a single purpose: defense. Old enemies became allies. Resources were pooled. Scientists worked together across borders. They offered to leave, to run again, to draw thee away from Earth. They did not want to bring war to the species that had sheltered them, but humanity refused. The governments issued a joint statement that echoed across the planet: "You are under our protection. We do not abandon our own." Military forces began to prepare. Human engineers, working with scientists, developed new weapons and shields based on combined technology. Factories that had once built cars and phones now built spacecraft and defense systems. Young men and women from every country volunteered to serve. The world had found a common enemy. Admiral James Mitchell was appointed to command the combined Earth Defense Fleet. He was a veteran of many human conflicts, but this was different. This was not nation against nation. This was species against species. He spent long hours talking with, learning about tactics, studying their weapons and weaknesses. They had been running for centuries. They knew the enemy well. They arrived on a spring morning. Their fleet emerged from deep space like a dark cloud, dozens of warships armed with weapons that could glass entire continents. They broadcast a simple message: "Surrender the prey and we will leave you in peace. Resist, and we will harvest your world as well." Humanity's response was transmitted across every frequency. They are under Earth's protection. They are refugees. They are civilians. They are innocent. We will not surrender them to you. This is our world. Turn back or face the consequences. The commander was confused. In 300 years of hunting, no species had ever stood up for them. Most civilizations were too afraid of power. Others simply did not care about refugees from another world. But these humans were different. They were young. They were primitive by galactic standards, and they were absolutely refusing to submit. The battle began in orbit. Human ships, newly built and untested, faced vessels that had conquered 100 worlds. The fighting was brutal. Human losses were heavy in the early hours, but humanity did not break. For every ship that fell, another took its place. Pilots fought with desperate courage, knowing that their families, their planet, and their new friends depended on them. The watched from Earth, unable to fight but praying for their protectors, stood with human leaders in a command bunker, offering advice and intelligence. She had never seen a species fight like this, with such fury and determination, not for territory or resources but for principle. She began to understand why they had been lucky enough to crash on this particular world. The tide turned when human engineers deployed a new weapon, a gravity disruptor based on designs but enhanced with human innovation. The device tore through shields like paper. Their warships began to fall. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy who could match their technology and exceed their will. The commander ordered a retreat. His fleet, reduced to less than half its original strength, limped away into deep space. They had come to harvest easy prey. They had found something very different. They had found a world of warriors who protected the weak and stood together against tyranny. Earth celebrated but cautiously. Everyone knew they would return eventually, with more ships and more weapons. But humanity had time now, time to prepare, time to grow stronger, time to build alliances with other species who had suffered under oppression. The formally became citizens of Earth. They were no longer refugees but brothers and sisters, members of the human family. They worked alongside humans to build defenses, develop technology, and prepare for the future. The galaxy had taken notice of what happened at Earth. Word spread among the stars. There was a world that protected refugees, a species that fought for those who could not fight for themselves. Other refugees began to arrive, survivors of aggression from distant worlds. Earth welcomed them all. Humanity had discovered something about itself, something that had always been there but had needed a challenge to reveal. They were not just a species, they were guardians. Lived out her remaining years on Earth, watching her people flourish and grow. She often visited schools where human children learned together. She told them stories about the old, about the long flight through space, and about the accident that had brought them to Earth. But her favorite story was always the same, the story of how a desperate people had crashed on an unknown world and found, against all odds, a home. The stars were vast and dark and full of dangers, but Earth was a light in that darkness, a beacon for the lost and the hunted. Humanity had chosen its role in the galaxy. They would be protectors, they would be defenders, they would be the species that said, "You are safe here, we will not let them hurt you." And they meant it.